you're listening to the Clock End Talk, an Arsenal podcast. I'm your host for today, Schwinn. As Tez misses out, you can find me on Twitter at AFC Schwinn. And as always, we're joined by Clock End Talk's very own version of Aaron Ramsey. It's Tony. How are you doing, Tony?
I'm good, thanks. I'll take what am I, severely underrated? Is that why I'm compared to Ramsey?
Severely underrated, and maybe we should tie you down to a new contract, before the season ends.
I'll take $200,000 a week. Just in case our listeners are wondering, Tez is sulking because Xhaka didn't play, so he's throwing his clothes out the pram and he's refusing to come on the podcast.
That's brilliant. Let's get stuck in and talk about a game. I mean, in a week where comebacks in Europe seem to be on the cards, Moscow almost reminded us that there are negative effects of resting on your laurels. But late goals, thanks to Danny Welbeck and Aaron Ramsey, crush all hopes. And we progress into the semi-finals of a European competition for the first time in 9 years, I think. So, good result. We'll, of course, talk about the draw that just took place, and we will be facing Atletico. The first leg will be at the Emirates. So we'll definitely take your questions, that we have a few of those, and we'll talk about what to expect from that game. So let's talk about the lineup. Of course, Granit Xhaka missed out, as Tony just pointed out. But other than that, Tony, were there any surprises for you in the lineup?
No, I mean, I tweeted after the lineup was announced that I think it picked itself. I think it was the exact same as what I said it would be on the last podcast, apart from El Neni in for Xhaka, because obviously when we last recorded, we didn't know Xhaka was ill. But apart from that, I think it picked itself, and nothing at all surprised me.
Yeah, same right there with you. There was some debate coming into this game whether Welbeck and Iwobi would get the nod over, of course, Mkhitaryan, who's missing through an injury. We have an update on Mkhitaryan as well that we'll get to. And some people were thinking that Jack Wilshere is going to miss out again. But as we discussed on this pod last time out, that Arsene does like to go with Jack because he gives him that solidity in terms of controlling the ball and retaining possession. But you know what? From early on, this game had shades of the Stoke game that we played a couple of weeks ago. And of course, it wasn't until the 70th minute that we actually scored and took the wind out of their sails. But from the first whistle, we were very sluggish and very, very slow to react. What were your initial thoughts on the first half and on the first 15-20 minutes of the game, rather?
It was a strange one. The first, I would probably stretch it to the first half hour, or maybe the first 25, because we didn't do anything and we looked slow and we looked very sloppy. We couldn't play 5-yard balls, and players are normally quite dependable. And I'm thinking mainly of Nacho Monreal here, just couldn't pass the ball to each other. It was weird. Their positioning was not as in they were playing in the wrong positions, but it was like they were taking up bad positions and all sorts. But I mean, they didn't offer anything and they weren't really a threat. And I think we just started to maybe get into the swing of things. We had a few counter-attacks with 2 bad final balls. Well, saying that, Welbeck's one to Ramsey I don't think was bad. I think it was a bit unlucky. And then Ramsey played a bad one between Ozil and Welbeck. And I think we was just starting to get in the game. And then the Zagoyev injury took a bit of the sting out of the game. And then they scored straight away. So rather than us picking up where we left off, it was like suddenly we were trying to get back up to full level, and they'd scored, and it hit us quite hard, I think.
Yeah, I think even Laurent Koscielny, in the first 10 minutes of the game, he was dispossessed. Well, not dispossessed, but he gave away possession cheaply about 3 or 4 times, I remember counting early in the game. As for the chance you mentioned, there was another one where Lacazette was slid in by Danny Welbeck. And Berezutski did very well to slide in and block the shot, but I think Lacazette should have definitely done better there. I don't think there's much to talk about in the first half, unfortunately. I mean, it's a testament to how bad the quality of the game was, especially from our side. And even CSKA, who looked to be dominating possession, didn't seem to threaten a whole lot. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I think I may be wrong, but I think they only had 2 shots on target, and they were both. I mean, it was obviously the header, and then it was saved, and they scored from the rebound. So it was 2 shots on target, but they were within a second of each other. I'm going to come on to criticise Czech later, but that was a world-class save for their first goal, and he got no reward for it. And I've seen people say, "Oh, should he have pushed it around the post? Should he have done this?" To be honest, I was just amazed he saved it. Not because it's him, because it was genuinely a top draw save. And then you see the common problem with Arsenal, that Koscielny, Mustafi and Bellerin, instead of reacting, all of them were stood there with their arms up in the air for a player that was nowhere near offside, just to tap it in from a yard or two. Instead of reacting and running towards the ball, they all put their arms up in the air.
Yeah, I think we have a question on our goalkeeping situation from Shri the Gooner, who's a regular. So thanks for that, Shri. We'll definitely get to that. But before we talk about the goal that you just spoke about, there was a couple of scares in the first half. And the number one scare, for me at least, and I'm sure for most Arsenal fans at this given moment, was the fact when Aaron Ramsey slid in and looked very slow to get up and get back into the game. Am I accurate in saying that your heart was in your mouth at that point?
No, because I mean, look, I've seen the injury since, as I'm sure most of us has, and it looks bad. But on a contact injury, which it obviously was, unless a bone's been broken, which is evident straight away usually, it tends to not be muscular. So usually the damage is only cosmetic, as Ramsey's is. Look, it's a very bad cut. I didn't think he would carry on. But I was never worried about a long-term injury. I see some people tweeting at the time, and obviously they didn't have the benefit of hindsight, which I do when I'm saying this, but saying, oh, it's a serious injury, looks like a bad one, his season could be over and whatnot. And I was never really worried about that, again, just on my first look at it, just because it was a contact injury and there's no way, because his foot wasn't planted, there's no way it could have been like a broken bone or whatnot.
As soon as he returned, although, which I think he was getting some treatment on the sidelines for about 4 or 5 minutes. As soon as he got back, Jack Wilshere picked up a knock on his foot. Did that bother you at all?
I don't know. It's difficult with Voldemort because he
I forgot
he goes
about that.
down. He goes down. I'll explain that to not new listeners in a bit. He goes down quite often, and every time he holds his ankles, sort of your heart's in your mouth just because of what he's been through with his ankles. Again, there didn't look like much in it, but he was down for a long time and he wasn't moving. He wasn't moving freely when he got up. The most worrying thing about the end of the first half is Ramsey. I think when he came back on was, I don't know if he'd just been stapled or they just bandaged it up and then they stapled it at half time. But I didn't think he was moving freely, and then Jack wasn't moving freely. And I wanted to punch Peter Cech in the face because they had all the possession. We finally got the ball. And instead of booting it out to get treatment or holding onto it for 20 seconds, this was 3 minutes of the 4-minute stoppage time. Instead of holding onto it for 30 seconds or booting it out of play for treatment, he tried a long ball to Ozil that fell about 15 yards short. And then they had another attack and they had a shot that went wide from it. And it was just like the game management, and I know a lot of people hate that phrase, but the game management, especially from Cech, who's our most experienced player, was awful.
Yeah, I think in the first half there was not a lot of bright spots in the game for either side, but there were certainly moments there where we could have done better. And the final ball, and even the build-up to the final ball was rather missing, and of course that brings the question whether how much we miss Granit Xhaka, and again we have a question on that, so I don't want to get into that too much. But since we're talking about Cech, let's talk about the goal. And as you mentioned, there was a rebound that Chalov, I think it was, who pounced on and found the back of the net. But what was your reaction to the goal, and how would you like to summarize the goal for me?
The guy that got the header, I forget his name, got a run on Monreal. I think it's difficult because I would say we was too deep, but where the ball came back from Vitinho on the byline, you kind of have to be that deep. But we were defending on the edge of the 6-yard box, and their I think it was their fullback or wing back ran in and had a sort of 5-yard start on Monreal. So as much as I thought Monreal had a very poor game, I don't blame him for getting beat in that instance. And as I said, I think it was a world-class save, but the reactions from the defence was awful. And I saw, again, everyone that listens regularly knows I'm not a stat man and I pretty much hate stats. I think they can tell you what you want them to tell you. But, if I asked the average fan what's our strongest back four, as in what's most likely to be picked, they would say Bellerin, Mustafi, Koscielny and Nacho. and then Czech as number 1, I assume. So that's our strongest back 5. Do you know how many clean sheets they've kept this season when they've started as a back 4?
But the way you're asking me, I want to say less than 5.
Yeah, try less than 1.
Is that so?
Yeah.
So we've excelled more so in our defensive prowess when we played a back 5 then, I'm guessing, is it?
Well, I mean, I know them players have kept clean sheets when they've been involved in a back 5, and also we've obviously kept clean sheets in a back 4, but it's just been when one of them players is missing. So either Kolasinac has been at left back or Chambers or Holden have been at centre back. But what most people would say is our strongest back 4. As I said, if the stat I saw was correct, and I can't think of any where it's not correct, so just off the top of my head, I think it is right. But yeah, our strongest back 4 hasn't kept a clean sheet this season.
Yeah, I think it talks more to the fact that Arsenal likes to play ball players. We've spoken again and again about that. And I think there's an element of that in the defensive selection as well. This is not to say that we have a better defender waiting in the wings or sitting on the bench. But if stats are to go by, and we know that we're not fond of stats on here, but of course Arsene is quite a lot into it. He's basically known for revolutionizing English football and bringing stats into it. But if he's looked into the data at all, then I'm sure there would have been some sort of introspection. But I think it speaks to the fact that he wants those ball-playing and experienced center backs and fullbacks in the team more so than the defensive ones, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's always based Arsenal on, and I do understand it, that the majority of teams we play, we're going to have the ball the majority of the time. So if we win the ball at the back, he wants someone that's confident in giving it to midfield and you can start attacks rather than someone that just hoofs it and gives the ball back. And there is a time and a place for that. And I think that's the balance we need to learn, is that, okay, you can be a ball-playing centre-back, but there is a time and a place when you just need to get rid.
Speaking of that, speaking of the fact that we do hold on to the possession against the majority of teams and we're the one who are usually probing, how surprising or shocking, rather, was it for you to see that despite fielding the lineup we did, which was by all means a very attacking lineup, it was the only one missing was Granit Xhaka, and of course that was due to the flu. Were you surprised that we were just unable to hold on to any possession and there was no tactical switch at all during the first half? I mean, I don't know how you would have changed it tactically, because it was just the players giving away the ball stupidly. I may be wrong, but I think I saw towards the end of the first half, just before they had that spell when we was down to 10 men. But I think when Ramsey went off for his treatment, I think we'd had more possession. But obviously we was carelessly giving the ball away. So if you've got more possession, I don't think you can blame the system. And if it's individual players, and as we pointed out, I think Nacho gave the ball away quite a lot, and so did Koscielny. And he's not gonna make a sub after 40 minutes and take one of them two off because they're giving the ball away too much. So, as much as there is obviously often things to criticise Wenger for, I don't think I can't logically see how a change of anything would have worked at that time. Fair enough. I think that's a good point. I mean, if you look at the bench, other than Alex Iwobi, I don't think we had a single strong player, if you can even call Alex that at this moment, to bring off the bench. I think they were all very inexperienced, the likes of Matt Macey, Eddie Nketiah. Callum Chambers was obviously brought on, and I think that was a good substitution. We'll definitely get into that at some point. But before we talk about the second half and about the second goal we conceded, if you were the manager, what would be your team talk going into the dressing room at halftime?
I mean, we always hear 2-0 is the most dangerous lead in football, and at half-time, that's essentially what it was. It's a difficult one because you don't know whether to stick or twist, and you can't just say go and just play. So it is a hard one. I think with Arsenal and the way we play, I think my team talk would have been just around reminding them of their technical qualities and reminding them if that they had the ball sort of 60% of the time, then they were very unlikely to concede to the 2 goals that would have taken us out.
And after the first goal, just rewinding for a second and going back there, did nerves settle in for you, or were you quite convinced of our quality and seeing what we had seen of CSKA over the first leg especially, you thought we could ride this wave out swiftly?
Yeah, I always thought we would score, so I wasn't really nervous, especially not at 1-0, because as I said, I think we'd controlled the ball in a sense, and we was a couple of final passes away from scoring ourselves. And I think if even when the final ball's bad, if you keep giving Arsenal a chance to make that final ball, at some point someone will find one. I mean, we've spoke about the 3 chances, the 2 bad final balls and the one Lacazette missed, but there was also one, I'm not sure if it was, I think it was at the start of the second half actually, where Welbeck overhit a ball through to Ramsey, who ran from deep and would have been 1-on-1. Akinfeev came out and claimed it just in front of Ramsey's feet, but again, it was another chance where the final ball would have like a better final ball would have led to a goal. So at 1-0, I wasn't too worried. Although I did think we looked very flat and we were just giving the ball away way too often.
Well, at 1-0, neither was I worried, but as soon as the second half kicked off, we were again pegged back in our halves, and as soon as we got an opportunity to break out, Aaron Ramsey got stuck in his feet, and the ball pounced to Golovin, who tried from 20, 25 yards out, maybe even more, and the ball was parried right to Nabapkin, who finished it comfortably. Nerves set in then at all?
Yes, because although I still believed we would score, mentality changes, and if they go 3-0 up and then park the bus, then suddenly we may have not got the chances to make that final ball that we was just short of getting earlier on. So at 2-0, I was starting to worry for the first time. On the goal, first of all, Golovin was excellent in both legs. I know we've been linked with him before, and I can't say I've seen loads of him. I'd heard of him before the first leg, but I can't remember ever seeing him play, or if I did have, he wasn't memorable. But in both legs, I thought he was excellent. He was their best player by miles, which I wasn't expecting. It's a good hit, but Czech should do a hell of a lot better. I think he actually dived too far. So he'd gone past the ball, and that meant he couldn't really parry it away how he would have liked. I'm not making excuses for him. If he has dived too far, it's his own fault. And then, good finish. And that's a finish that's harder than it looks. So fair play to the Moscow player for finishing that. Had we lost that game 3-0, I wouldn't be saying this, but we didn't. So, but yeah, horrible mistake from Czech. Good effort from Golovin and good finish.
Nacho at all at fault for you there? I felt, credit where credit is due, and maybe Nabapkin was the quickest to react, and that was a decently acute angle. He didn't have a lot of goal to shoot at. But do you think the defense should have reacted better, especially when you have so much time to react when the shot is being taken from such a distance? You have time to prepare yourself as a defender. And if it was Bellerin or Mustafi, I wouldn't be asking you this question because I think we both know the answer to that. But someone like Koscielny or Nacho, you would expect them to react quicker and do their job then, right?
It's a difficult one because Czech's made an error, which I think we can all agree on. And a player can't react in case of an error at all times, because otherwise it would completely change the way they play and the way the whole game goes. Instead of thinking, I should be doing this, they can't allow for other people's errors. So I'd like to think I would be the same level of not harsh if it was Bellerin or Mustafi. I think I would be. Just because, as I said, I don't think you can play a game thinking, what if he does this wrong? You've got to more trust in the ability of your teammates and think, what if he does this right? I mean, to flip it to the other side of the pitch, when say Ozil's playing a through ball, the striker makes the run as if he's going to play the through ball, not he doesn't take the insurance option and think, well, what if Ozil makes a mistake here? I know it's a bit different, but I think they have to play with trust in their teammates. So I don't really blame Nacho for it.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Bellerin, after obviously conceding the second goal, the game did open up a bit, and it seemed like there was a little more purpose from our side, obviously knowing that one more goal and we would be in a bit of a pickle. So Bellerin surges forward down the right, and there's a bit of interplay. I was going to say tiki-taka, but I don't like using that. But there was a bit of decent interplay, and Bellerin puts a ball in for El Neni, who was, of course, deemed offside, and correctly so. Did you jump out of your seat when that happened? Because I did.
No, I have quite good peripheral vision, I don't know why I've said that, but I saw the flag go up straight away. I didn't know by looking at the pitch he was offside, but I saw from the corner of my eye the pictures I had, and I don't know if it's different pictures of stream around the world. You could just see the linesman, and I saw the flag go up straight away. So no.
Fair enough. What did you make of Hector Bellerin's performance? It's been a couple of weeks since we've dissected what Hector's been up to. Maybe it's because of a good string of results that we've been on, and we haven't really concentrated that much on our defensive inefficiencies. But yesterday's performance, what did you make of Hector Bellerin?
Just absolutely nothing. Like, nothing bad, nothing good. Just almost a passenger. I don't even know if this is criticism or not. He was just another player on the pitch. We have this thing at Arsenal, and I actually don't blame him for it, but our fullbacks back off way too much, and they sort of wait until a player gets into the area. And I know it wasn't him, but for the first goal, it shows where no one went and shut down the cross. And Bellerin does it all the time, but as I said, I don't blame him for it.
And to be fair, I think that's a very good point. Sorry for interrupting you, but even against Southampton, the goal Shane Long scored, I think Kolasinac, we didn't discuss this last week, but I saw some highlights, and I think Kolasinac could have done much better to stop the ball from coming into the box. I think you raise a very good point there.
It's a trait Arsenal fullbacks have had for 8 years, probably, at least. I mean, it winds me up where obviously I sit on the wing, like when I'm at the Emirates. My season ticket is not behind the goal; it's on the long side, as a lot of fans like to call it. Mm-hmm. So I'm in line with fullbacks, and I see Arsenal fullbacks do not engage until the area, which has frustrated me for as long as I can remember. So you can't really blame Hector for that, but it still annoys me. But yeah, in terms of him yesterday, I just think, I don't know. I don't know how to describe that game. Just nothing. As I said, he was just another player on the pitch. And it's not particularly criticism. I don't think he impacted the game at either end of the pitch.
Just for our listeners who don't understand the colloquialism behind longside, it's very close to Arsene Wenger, and it's not behind the goals, but it's on that side of the stadium. But I think one term that most fans know is rosette, and that's exactly what Lacazette found with his shot, which he took on a half volley, if you will, from outside the box. What happened to Lacazette after a couple of games that he's played ever since returning from injury? This was shades of the Lacazette we saw, at the end of the first half of the season, where he really struggled to find goal. What did you make of his performance yesterday?
Awful. I have been a big critic of Lacazette, as regular listeners will know. And in the few games since he's been back, he done everything that I criticised him for. He corrected and done right, and I praised him in all of them games. Yesterday, he went back to everything I've disliked about him. He was coming too short. He needed to fill the ball. And then when we did break, he didn't bust the gut. And I don't know who your commentary feed was to anyone listening, but we had Robbie Savage on, and I don't really value what Robbie Savage says, in all honesty. But there was one break we had. It was a counter-attack, and Welbeck broke down the left. And he was on his own, and you can see Lacazette just jogging in the middle. And Robbie Savage went, look at Lacazette. He's not even busting a gut to get into the area. And that's my problem with him. It's like he's not hungry to get in the box and score the goals. And that's the problem I've had with him all along. Look, his link-up play is very good. And again, yesterday, his link-up play was good. But and I've seen a few tweets, again, people saying, oh, we're not giving him the service. How can you give him the service when we're making a break and he's jogging along the middle of the pitch? There was another break we had, I think it was early in the second half, where we ended up 4-on-3 and Voldemort had the ball. And to his right, Lacazette just wasn't interested in making up the ground, and Voldemort outran him with the ball. So it ended up, instead of being 4-on-3, where Lacazette hasn't broke forward, we ended up 3-on-3. And obviously nothing came from the attack. I can't really remember exactly how it broke down. But it was, again, everything that I moaned about earlier in the season. And people were coming at me in the last few weeks and saying, you was wrong, he's done this. And they were right. And I hold my hands up. But them same people better realise this week that he done everything that he's previously been criticised for.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic there, because that's not what you expect from him. I mean, that's at least not what I expected from him when he joined the club. And considering the prolific record he had, I think many of us expected him to be banging in the goals. But I think you've made a very astute observation that when we struggle to hold the ball and especially get him the service, then he is very prone to fall back, fall deeper, and try to be a part of the build-up. And that really takes a lot of focus out from the opposing central defenders, and they have a lot more freedom there. I think he will do well to reassess, and I hope there is some film study that is done where he is told to retain his position and not try and be a part of the possession. So we can give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, considering the result has not impacted us in the way it could have, and he is coming back from injury. But you did raise Voldemort's name, and I think this is a good time to talk about that, because around the 68th minute, Jack, or as known as Voldemort on our podcast, for reasons that Tony will surely get into, was replaced by Callum Chambers. Now, personally speaking, I thought that was a very, very good change, and not just because of the way it worked out, but I think we needed something back in the defense, and that also helped free up Mohamed El Neni, who of course went on to assist 2 goals. What was going through your mind when you saw Callum coming on for Voldemort?
So just for anyone who's new listening, I apparently say the number 10's real name too much, and it's all I talk about. So he is now he who shall not be named, and that was too long to say, so Voldemort is. Everyone else is allowed to say it, so I'm not sure why Shrin's calling him Voldemort, but hey-ho. I mean, we went with that weird El Neni sort of being the third centre-back / a midfielder when we've got the ball, and it doesn't really transition well. It has worked in games. It worked excellently against Chelsea in the Carabao Cup semi-final at home. But we were trying to do that at the start of the second half, and it didn't work at all. So rather than leave El Neni on as a centre-back, I think the change was inevitable, and it was a question of who was going to come off. I said last week, I think Voldemort's carried an injury due to the strapping that he was warming up with around his knee. He obviously was limping at the end of the first half. So then when I saw Chambers getting ready to come on, I didn't think it'd be anyone but him. And it worked quite well, because instead of going to a hybrid back five, it was an actual back five. And you can agree or disagree with the merits of a back five as much as you want or as much as I want, but we all must realise that an actual back five is better than a makeshift back five. So if they once had made that decision that they were going to play a back five, then I have absolutely no issues of making the change. So it's actually defenders playing there rather than a midfielder that's sort of never really played there.
Well, back five or not, but if you don't clear your lines well, you will be in for a pickle. And I think someone who I am obviously very fond of, and our listeners would know, is Mesut Ozil. But when the ball was cleared from that one corner and Mesut Ozil half-heartedly went up for that header and Ignashevich had a pop from outside the box, I'll tell you, I was willing to cut his head off because of the impetus that he lacked in that position. Was that the final straw for you almost? That we have to really now do something about not conceding and try and focus on this game? Because it did seem to me that we just had no concentration at that point.
That one, just on that isolated incident, I mean, I think people everyone knows I'm a big Ozil fan, but people are blinded as to how often he does that. Whenever the ball's in the air, he doesn't particularly look at the ball. He looks at the man and makes a half-hearted challenge if he challenges at all. I remember a few weeks ago, or maybe a couple of months ago now, there was a thing, who are your top 5 Arsenal players' favourite, not best, players of the Emirates era, and Ozil didn't make it in mine. And I remember you asked me, this wasn't on the podcast, it was on Twitter, you asked me why no Ozil, and I think I had like Cazorla in there and whatnot. And I said I never wanted to run on the pitch and punch Cazorla in the face, whereas Ozil, it does happen. And I think by you saying you wanted to rip his head off then, I think you kind of get what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's so standard from Ozil that I think it's been noticed more because it was on the edge of our area rather than sort of 50, 60 yards out where it tends to be. But he does it all the time. So I kind of wasn't really shocked.
No arguments on that point. I think a lot of times, which is also very baffling to me, is when the goalkeeper is trying to find a man in our attacking line. It's usually it's Mesut Ozil who's kicked the ball out to. we've for a very long time resorted to kicking the ball out to the right, but we used to have Sanya up there, who was good at winning headers, and I don't understand the logic behind still continuing kicking the ball towards the right when it's Mesut Ozil. Now, when the ball is being kicked around the halfway line, and you try to play the man and try to pounce onto the rebound, that makes sense. He has the foresight, as we know, to be able to do that. But on the edge of your box, when you're being pegged back in a game that is so level begging, in a way, I thought it was criminal for him to do that and not contest the ball with more vigor. And it could have gone very badly for us. But up steps Danny Welbeck, and I'll let you do the talking on this one.
Do you know what? The turn is so good.
Sublime.
But on all the highlights and everything, that kind of gets cut out. Like, it just shows the 1-2. That goal, if a bigger name player scores it, I don't want to use the cliche of if Ronaldo scores it or if blah, blah, we'd be seeing it a hell of a lot more. But the turn is exceptional. The ball from El Neni is very, very good. It's a top draw. But the weighting of that ball is exceptional. And it's a great finish from Danny. He was in the team purely for his ability to run and get in behind the defence. And he's done his job there. I can't say I'd put my house on him scoring from there because it's Danny. But he did, and I think at that point we knew we was through. But the goal was, I don't even want to say it was well worked because it was only really between two players. But the turn took one defender out of the game, and the pass from El Neni took another 2 or 3 out. And then, as I said, it was a great finish.
Yeah, sometimes there's a lot of joy in the simple things, and I'm sure, just like the both of us, most Arsenal fans were very, very happy at that moment. We know Nacho Monreal was ecstatic about that goal. That's, I think, an understatement. For those wondering what we were on about, maybe go check out our Twitter page and see what the conversation was there. But the next change was Lacazette comes off for Iwobi, and of course Iwobi was slid in by Mesut Ozil around the 89th minute, and he scuffed his shot wide. What does that tell you about Alex Iwobi's left foot?
Do you know, you've done him given him credit there. He didn't scuff it. That's what's even more worrying. He made a clean contact. It was just that bad. I mean, I don't know why he took it on his left foot in the first place. He had so much time. He could have opened his body and tried to do a similar finish to how Welbeck scored. And I've seen him use that type of finish before, so it's obviously something he's confident in. So it was weird that he took it on his left, but it shows the lack of confidence he has at the moment. He completely snatched it. He probably had enough time to take a touch. If he was going to take it on his left foot, then he definitely had enough time to take it a touch, take it a little bit wider and give himself more of an angle. And it meant he could have gone either side of the goal then. But, yeah, it was just, I don't know, there's only so much you can say when you see stuff like that so often from him.
Yeah, I was surprised that he didn't take the near post option. I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with him using his left foot. I like players who are confident in using either foot. We can debate as to the reason why he used his left foot. As you said, it's probably because he didn't think he had the time, which he clearly did. If he had time to open up his hips and take a shot with his right, he definitely had the time to assess what was going on. But I'm surprised because from that angle, and especially where Akinfe was standing, I think he would have been better off trying his luck at the near post, which was I think more open than you would usually find from that angle. So maybe we can give some credit to Akinfe there for closing the angle down well, but having the performance Iwobi had this past weekend, you would expect him to bury that. And it was very, very surprising that he didn't take that chance.
I'm not going to say I was very surprised he didn't take it, if I'm honest.
Fair enough. I think I was, because when you have that wave of confidence in you, from the last game, you would expect him to deliver, but maybe I'm just looking at it from rose-tinted glasses. But we can always expect Aaron Ramsey to put the tie to bed, and that's exactly what he did late on. Elneny slid a beautiful pass. I was half expecting Elneny to find Mesut Ozil, who held his run really well, I thought. But he opted for an even better ball and let Aaron Ramsey through on goal. Were you surprised that Ramsey then went for goal, or were you expecting him to lay off the ball on either side, either to Welbeck or to Ozil?
Great ball by Elneny, but I actually think it was for Welbeck. If you look, he passes the ball and then looks at Welbeck and sort of Ramsey takes over. In terms of the finish, a brilliant finish. You know the keeper is half going to have to go down there or shift his weight. I think Ramsey was clever in that he took it sort of, not even a yard, but he took it a little bit to the right, meaning to his right, meaning Akinfeev had to move. So then anything the other side is going to go in. I wasn't at all surprised that Ramsey didn't pass. And to be honest, I don't think Ozil really kept up with him on his left. And Welbeck probably also wasn't in the greatest position. And also once Aaron had taken that little touch to his right, that meant the keeper was on that side of the goal. So it kind of took out the pass as an option. But I mean, he meant that. He didn't. That touch wasn't by accident. He knew if I make Akinfeev move one way and pull it the other, he literally cannot save the ball. So it was quite calculated. And it goes back to what we were talking about last week with footballers just doing things. And we were talking about Ramsey, actually, when we said about his lob, and he said he saw the keeper coming out. And the replay showed he didn't look, and there was probably no way he could have saw the keeper coming out. And it's, I don't know if you'd call it football intelligence. And I think he showed the same there by knowing if he moves the keeper one way, the keeper then can't get back the other. But he doesn't have to think that process. He just does it. But again, that's where football intelligence comes into it.
Yeah, very, very instinctive, and very, very calm in that moment. I mean, the tie was almost over, after we scored that first goal. But it's always nice to still get something out of a game in isolation, and considering the gash he picked up, of course, it probably wasn't as painful as a muscle or a bone-on-bone injury, but it was still pretty deep from what we saw after the game, and I'm sure most Arsenal fans have seen that at this point. So very happy for Ramsey, very happy that injury is not something that we need to be scared about, and very happy that we've made it past into the next round. Before we talk about our upcoming opponent, which is Atletico, of course, quick shout-out for man of the match.
I've seen a lot of people give it to El Neni, and I'm not going to, and I don't want the usual hate we get, you just dislike El Neni, because I've seen that on Facebook quite a bit. I think El Neni had a very good game in the second half. I thought he was quite poor in the first half, if I'm honest. Whereas, I'm going to give it to Danny. He got the crucial goal. He ran his socks off. He ran them ragged. Even in the first half, when we didn't do anything really, all of the chances you can think of, it was his ball to Ramsey that didn't quite make it. It was the cutback from Ramsey was between him and Ozil. Every attacking situation, his name. Even in the second half, to be honest, every attacking situation you speak about, you have to mention Danny's name. Even Ramsey's goal, he was there. Like you said, should he have passed it to Welbeck? And I think El Neni's ball was to Welbeck. So I think everything we done good going forward, you mentioned Welbeck's name, even in a poor first half. Whereas I think in the first half, I was not disappointed with El Neni. I think he was as bad as some of the other players in the first half, but he massively picked it up in the second half.
I would have to agree. I think even defensively he was on point to run back and provide cover. Of course, when we took off Lacazette and brought on Iwobi, Welbeck went on to the right, and Iwobi took up his position on the left and leaving Mesut Ozil in the hole. Now, that requires a lot of teamwork, and that requires taking up responsibilities that someone else is supposed to take up, because Mesut Ozil towards the tail end of the game will not be able to put in a shift as he is for the rest of the game. So for that finish, for that turn that he made, especially when the game was well balanced, for Moscow to get something out of the tie, and for his teamwork, for coming back after all this criticism, I think Danny Welbeck seriously deserves a shout. Again, as you said, Tony, this is nothing against El Neni, and he of course had those two brilliant moments, but I think that's all it was for El Neni. For Welbeck, I think it was a brilliant performance, and he stepped up when no one else seemed they would. So brilliant result after 70 minutes of really, really sluggish performances from the whole team pretty much. But the next challenge is going to be very hard. And, me and you spoke about this a little bit before the game, before we started recording today, sorry. And it is now certain that we will be playing Atletico for the semi-final, and Salzburg will be taking on Marseille in the other semi-final. Where do we go with this? What are your initial thoughts?
I think it's the worst draw. I think we're capable in a one-off game of beating pretty much anyone. I think over 2 games, we're more likely to see our frailties, of which there are quite a few, as we all know. So, I mean, I know you've got a different view, but I would have preferred to get either of the other teams. I'm not saying we can't beat Atletico, but our strengths are going forward. We tend to score, even if we look slow and sluggish sometimes. It's very, very rare that we don't score, especially at home. But Atletico are very strong defensively and they don't concede a lot. Our frailties are defensive issues, clearly. And some may say that Atletico attacking-wise aren't brilliant, but they've got, even if they're not, they've got the individuals. I mean, Costa can play. Griezmann's obviously top draw. Torres is, I know he's on his way out, but he's still capable. And then a few other players, and then they've got Sal Niguez, Koke. I mean, they've got players all over the place that can hurt you. And they're also not playing for anything in the league. They're going to get Champions League places from the league. So they can, as much as we can, their sole focus can be on the Europa League as much as ours is. So for me, it was the worst possible draw. I think we can go through, but at this point, my money wouldn't be on us.
I think that's a fair call. I mean, for me, Atletico, obviously, in the ideal scenario, we just wouldn't have to face them, throughout the tournament. Someone would knock them out, and it almost seemed like yesterday Sporting would do a number on them. They scored a goal early on, and they just couldn't find the back of the net because of Jan Oblak and the superhero that he is at goal. For me, I would rather face Atletico over 2 legs than on one. And as you said, that our defensive frailties might show more over 2 legs. Just to sort of play devil's advocate on that, I think the law of averages also kicks in. And knowing how Arsene sets up, which is not at all based on the opposition, I think we will be better off after having played them once and then try to chase something out of it. I do think that despite the first leg being at the Emirates, we will struggle. But I think that will give us some more insight as to how to go after them in the second leg and get something out of this tie. Again, it's a tough one to make a bet on, and I'm definitely not a betting man, so I wouldn't know where my money lies. But on current form and on how things are going right now, and with the most recent Henrik Mkhitaryan update, it seems like he might just make it back in time for that tie. So I'm not too worried about them for now. Of course, as the game edges closer, things might get a little more tense. But I don't really mind the draw. I think I would have rather faced them in the semifinal than in the final. I mean, losing a final is always hard, and you always want a chance to redo that. And I think if you're able to get past Atletico, then there's no stopping us. Because credit to Salzburg and Marseille for making it this far out, but the kick we'll get, the high we'll enjoy after sailing past Atletico, I think will be too strong for anyone to do anything about.
Yeah, look, I mean, I can't say I agree. I don't think you've said anything wrong, but just my feelings are different. But question for you, would you take a 0-0 at home in the first leg now if I offered it? I would.
No, I wouldn't. I think we'll struggle, but I think we'll get something out of it. Again, I'm being extremely optimistic here. There's no denying that. I would be a fool to say otherwise. But I think we'll be able to get something out of it. Of course, momentum plays a huge part in all of this. And there's still a couple of weeks for the first leg to kick off. There might be some injuries that we or they might pick up. We have to face a couple of teams that are battling relegation. That will always be a tough task for us to go and do a job on them. And this all works out. Just because they're different tournaments doesn't mean that we can switch on and off or between different modes. Sorry, it's all gonna work out together, I feel. And if it does the way I hope it will, I don't think a 0-0 right now would do us any good.
I was just thinking, if we go there 0-0, no away goal, so then we score 1 and they've got to score 2, basically. They've got to outscore us.
I cannot disagree with that. You're exactly right. But I think there might be something in this for us. So let's hope my optimism is not dumbfounded and there's something to this, because I think we have something on the cards here that will do us good. But anyway, let's move forward and just quickly review the game we have coming up this weekend against Newcastle. Are you making the ride up north?
Yeah, so I'm going. So it's midday, lunchtime on Friday in the UK here. I'm going up tomorrow. I'm actually leaving midday tomorrow. I'm going for a night out on the Toon, and then I will be at the game on Sunday.
What's your predicted lineup, and would you expect strong 11 or something more along the lines of Southampton?
A bit stronger than Southampton, but not at full strength. We've not got a midweek game now, so I mean, obviously the Europa League's now 2 weeks from yesterday away, so we can afford to not have to look forward in terms of, obviously when we played against Southampton, we was looking ahead to the Moscow game. Whereas this one, we don't have a midweek game to worry about. I don't think Ramsey will travel just because of the gash in the leg either. I mean, he could play if I think he'd be fit to play, but do they risk it? Probably not. We don't know what Xhaka's like in terms of his illness. So, I mean, I really struggled last week to pick a lineup, and I would again this week. As I said, I just think it'll be stronger than last week, but not full strength. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's the first time we see Lacazette and Aubameyang together, depending on how Lacazette's got through playing 70-odd last night, in terms of how his body's feeling.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one, and I'm pulling up the league table as we talk here, and Newcastle are in 10th position, so they're definitely safe from relegation by any means. Do you think that we have something to worry about in terms of dropping points? You know, we're just 3 points adrift from Chelsea at this point, and about 5 points ahead of Burnley. So we can look ahead and not necessarily worry about who's chasing us right now. And I know you've mentioned before that the league position for you right now is almost not a talking point. But I don't want us to completely give up on the league. Do you think there's going to be a similar outlook from Arsene as well?
See, it's a tough one for me because while I think the league position is irrelevant, I don't think the games are, because as you've said, you kind of need momentum going into things. Despite it being a different competition, you can't just turn up and go, oh, it's the Europa League, we're going to play well today, and oh, it's the league, we're going to play badly today. So while I don't particularly care about the league position, I'd care about performance. So, but obviously, if we keep performing well, then the league position will come with it. So, I guess, I don't know. Wenger will probably, he'll want to go and win, of course. How much he'll rest players, I don't know, and obviously it remains to be seen.
Would you rest Hector Bellerin?
I mean, we've got a question on this later on about his fatigue. With a week off, I'd probably be more inclined to play him and then rest him against West Ham, who's our game after next Sunday.
Right.
Because, as I said, you've got the week off after this, and then that rests him before the Atletico game rather than resting him 2 weeks before, which doesn't really help too much in terms of recuperation.
Mm-hmm. We'll definitely talk about Bellerin a little more. As you said, Sanjay asked a question about that, who is at Sanjay Torani. So we'll get to that. But before we get to the questions, quick prediction for our listeners?
10-0.
10-0 to the Arsenal. You know what? I'm feeling generous too. I'll go 10-0 as well this time. Let's see if the stars align and we're able to get something magical at St. James's Park. Anyway, let's move forward and let's get into our listener questions. I'll get the ball rolling on this, and I meant to talk to you about this anyway. This is Glenn Baxter, who's obviously a regular. Thanks for your support, Glenn, at Glenn Baxter 1980. Although this question is geared towards Tez, since Tez is not joining us and has, as Tony said, thrown his toys out of the pram, he goes on to ask, when is everyone going to realize how much CSKA does for this team? We missed him in this game. He might not be the world's best, but he does his job, and we are a better team for it. I must say, I completely agree with Glenn. What's your stance on this?
I mean, I think I've pretty much said all along, I think we're a better team with him. He passes the ball forward, and this isn't a criticism at El Neni, because El Neni passes the ball forward too, but I think Xhaka he moves the ball quicker, And when the balls get to our attacking players, they're usually in better positions because of the speed he's giving it to them, or his passes are slightly more ambitious and when they come off it again, gives us a better positioning. So we do miss him. You can argue about his defensive capabilities or lack of, but I personally believe we are a much better team with him in the side.
I agree. I completely agree. I think, as you said, he passes the ball early, and that gives our forward players the chance to run at the defenders. And we are, I think, better when it comes to playing a little bait-based football, because our runs are intelligent, our movement is very good, especially with the likes of Mesut Ozil and Mkhitaryan. Aaron Ramsey is always bombing forward. He's very unpredictable. So with everything happening in front of him, I think he's very, very good on the ball, and that helps us a lot. And I think yesterday was the perfect illustration of that, so I completely agree.
Okay, next one is from the Texas Schooner, who, again, is a regular contributor. Who is a bigger miss when absent in central midfield, Ramsey or Xhaka? We all know Tez's answer.
I think Tez is now the official Xhaka fanboy of the Clock and Talk. I have to say, and this might be a little unexpected, but I have to say Granit Xhaka. I know Aaron Ramsey is enjoying a brilliant run of form right now, and more power to Aaron because he is putting the team on his back. But I think what Aaron excels at is attacking football, in a very basic sense, attacking football, if I want to put him in a basket. And I think we have a lot of options when it comes to attacking football. So if Aaron is missing, then we have other players who can take up that responsibility and deliver in the final third. But when Granit Xhaka is missing, I think our defensive unit as a whole sort of sinks, and it's on the verge of collapsing. And I think yesterday, the first 70 minutes showed that. As good as El Neni can be at keeping the play, going and ticking, he's not a central defensive midfielder by any stretch of the imagination. He can sit back and be quick to move up forward when he retrieves the ball, but it's not often that he retrieves the ball. I haven't looked up any stats, but I don't think he slid in even once for a challenge yesterday. I don't, off the top of my head, remember an interception he made that kept us, that propelled us forward. I might be wrong here because, as I said, I haven't seen any stats, but I think what Xhaka brings and has slowly inculcated in his game is a positional sense that makes up for his lack of pace. And you know as well as I do that most of Xhaka's criticism is his lack of pace. But his positional sense has improved recently, and I think that makes us defensively very solid. So I would have to go with Granit Xhaka on that.
It's a very tough one for me because if you're asking me who is a better player, I think the answer for most of us, apart from Tez, would be Ramsey. Well, that's my opinion anyway. But when Ramsey was out injured he got injured against Southampton away in December, and he was out for sort of 4 to 6 weeks off the top of my head. I don't really think we missed him. And Voldemort played well in that time. But it may be my memory may be going, but I don't remember people going during the games that we didn't win, or if we would have had Ramsey, or even when we won, or sort of I'm missing seeing Ramsey in the side. This isn't taken away from Ramsey. I think he's an excellent player. But when we was without him, I don't think we really noticed it. Whereas when we are without Granit, even when we win or we get a result like we did yesterday, I think everyone noticed he wasn't in the team. The issue is, I don't think Ramsey has the bad games that Xhaka has. I think when Xhaka's bad, he does it properly. He is properly bad. Whereas when Ramsey's bad, maybe it's a case of positioning, but when Ramsey's bad, he's never like, oh my God, I never want to see this guy play for the club again. Whereas Xhaka's probably had a few of them games for some people. So I may take a leaf out of your two books and get splinters on my arse and sit on the fence with this one.
I mean, I think that's a bit unfair on me considering I just gave you a pretty concrete answer. Before I respond to you, just for our listeners, Real Madrid are going to be playing Bayern Munich in the semifinals of the Champions League. So that makes for some interesting football to watch, surely. I think what you said about Granit is very accurate, but I think that's also driven by the fact that the role he plays in the team. I mean, we both know that Xhaka and Ramsey usually are the midfielders who will sit back, and the front four do the most of the attacking with Ramsey surging forward. And Xhaka is the one charged with sitting back and being the pivot, if you will. So I think in that sense, you're right, that when Xhaka has a bad game, it's more visible. But do you think that's more because of the role that he is playing? And because if Aaron Ramsey does not have the good game, which does happen every now and then, of course, then there are other players who take up that responsibility in the form of Mesut Ozil, Aubameyang now, and the Lacazettes and Mkhitaryan's of our team. Do you think that's at all a factor in this?
I think it's a factor, but I do think anyone, even maybe Tez, would have to admit that when Xhaka is bad, he does it properly. As I said, position is a factor because when he makes a mistake, it's usually closer to our own goal and more dangerous when he makes a mistake. But he doesn't seem to, or it's very rare he makes one mistake. It seems if he makes one early on, you know what you're going to get from him. He won't be able to pass the ball. He'll miss every tackle. He'll lose every 50-50. So, yes, it is more noticeable because of position. But as I said, I just think when he's bad, he is very bad.
Yeah, I hope that he listens to our podcast and knows that he has been phenomenal. I'm sure he's been told by the staff at the club as well in the past few weeks that he's been phenomenal, and I hope he can just pick up where he left off with this bout of illness and continue excelling in that position, because I expected much better things from him this season. I remember telling a buddy of mine that I expect him to be in the team of the year, but of course that things haven't worked out that way. For him or for the club. So let's hope that this off-season does him some good, and maybe the World Cup will also get him some experience that he needs. Let's move forward, and of course this is something that we were thinking of talking about. This is from Shri the Gooner, who asks, what is the thinking behind Arsenal having two average, in parentheses, on present form, goalkeepers? Most of the top teams have a clear number one goalkeeper.
I guess competition. I think competition's always healthy. And you say, Liverpool don't. Well, they do now. They've decided Karius is their number one, probably in the same way that we've decided Cech is our number one. But 3 months ago, you didn't have a clue who was going to start for Liverpool. And at least with Arsenal, you knew who was going to start. And I wouldn't say any of Liverpool's... If you gave me a choice so you could either have our two keepers or Liverpool's two keepers, I would personally choose ours. You can make exceptions for United and City because they've got two of... for me, De Gea is the best keeper in the world. And from what I've seen of Ederson, I'd be placing him in the top 10 at least. So, of course, they're going to have a standout number one. And then Tottenham, they've got no competition for Lloris. I rate Lloris, but he's suffering from the lack of competition because he's made a lot of mistakes recently, which is unlike what we've seen from him in previous years, and maybe that's a lack of competition. He knows that he can pretty much play poorly and still be in the team because Vorm isn't capable competition. So I think the idea behind it is competition for places. I think what's upsetting a lot of Arsenal fans, or maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, but I'd say if you were to rate them out of 10, they're probably a 7 and a 6 out of 10, or an 8 and a 7, however harsh you want to be. Whereas we would like a 9.5 and maybe a 6 as a backup because they're rarely going to play. And that's maybe what United have got. I'd say they've got a 9.5 or a 10 out of 10 in De Gea, and then their backup keeper, Romero, to be fair, isn't bad, but he's probably on Ospina's level. And the same with City. You'd say Ederson's a 9+, but then Bravo is, I would say, again, Ospina's better than Bravo. So I see where the question's coming from, but it's about them world-class keepers. We're looking at 80 million, not we personally, but the price quoted for Oblak is around 80 million. And he's one of not many. Alisson Becker it would probably be around the same sort of money, but they're probably the only other sort of 9 out of 10 keepers that are available. And if not, you're going to look at someone like a Butland or a Horn or a Leno. And are they that much of an improvement? Would it say you rate Checker an 8 and Ospina at a 7? You might be going to an 8.5 and a 7, but you're still going to have two relatively similar levels of keepers, I feel.
Just quickly, because it seems like there's a lot of talk about and a lot of desire from Arsenal fans about getting a goalkeeper in the summer. And, of course, we've been linked with the likes of Jan Oblak. And, of course, Alisson is also someone who will probably, make some movement in the summer. How do you rate our chances of going on a spending spree on getting one of those two?
Less than 10% chance of it happening, I think. I would say less than 1% chance, but I don't want to be the guy that people go, you said this. But I don't think. I can't see us paying 80 million for a keeper. I can't see us paying 80 million for anyone, which is Oblak's release clause, give or take. And Roma are broke, but they know what they've got in Alisson. So they're not going to take less than 60, I don't think, because they know what they've got there. I mean, he's keeping Ederson out of the Brazil side.
Right.
So, and Ederson went for 40 plus, and you've got to factor in, obviously, that he's coming to the Premier League where everyone knows the money is, and the price automatically goes up when any Premier League team comes calling. So for me...
For you, that's more finance-driven and not necessarily priority-driven, then I'm guessing?
A bit of both. I think they come in line. I think you've got to, with priorities and finance, go hand in hand. If they were available for 10 million, then you'd buy them and they'd be more of a priority. But when you look at the budget we're going to have, whatever that may be, you have to prioritise. So I think budget and finances go hand in hand. Priorities and finances go hand in hand.
Fair enough. I don't want to talk too much about our goalkeepers because I think I've made my feelings very clear on this, so I think we can move forward.
Okay, next question is from MAA Gunner. How do Atletico like to play?
It seems like he knew something that we didn't, sending this question almost.
Well, he also asked if we don't get Atletico in the semis, blah, 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 but we did. So I'll just ask this part of the question.
Right, so I think everyone knows that Simeone is one of those tacticians who resemble Jose Mourinho's style of play, but maybe on steroids. He loves sitting deep and getting teams on the counter. He has the likes of Diego Costa now and Griezmann, of course, who are good outlets. Griezmann, a pacey one, and Costa, someone who can hold the ball and make space for his team as the players move up the field. But for me, the crux of Atletico's team is in its midfield and the likes of Saul and Koke. I think those two players make that team tick. Their work rate off the ball is incredible. I've seen bits and pieces of them this season, and they've been very, very good. There are obviously instances where they falter, just like most other teams, and I think for Atletico, it's their fullbacks that are weak, relatively speaking, of course. But the spine of the team is incredible, from its center backs to, of course, Jan Oblak, who we've spoken about at length, to its central midfielders in Saul and Koke, and, of course, Griezmann and Costa. What's interesting to me is that Arsenal are very similar. Of course, no one's accused us of having a very strong spine these days, but we do like to play centrally more so than on the wings. Our players tuck in, and we provide width through our fullbacks, but most of our attack comes from the middle of the park. So I think it's going to be a fascinating tie, and I think that's one of the reasons that I'm a little optimistic, because our flair power, if that's a term, is a little more stronger than Atletico's, whereas they rely mostly on their pace and strength in coming out of the box and hitting teams on the break. So that's what I know of Atletico. I'm interested to know what you think about this, Tony.
As crazy as it sounds, I wouldn't be surprised if they play a lot of long ball against us. As you said, we need our fullbacks to create the width, and they're going to play Griezmann as a sort of 10-ish behind Costa if everyone's fit. And Costa's always going to be a handful in the channels, and Griezmann's very quick, so he'll be a handful in the channels. So I wouldn't be surprised if they set us into a trap of letting our fullbacks come up to provide that width, and then as soon as they win the ball back, I'm not going to say ignoring Koke and Saul Niguez, because they're both brilliant players, but not using them as much as they usually do to control the ball, and go back to front quite quickly, but play in the channels where they can spring on us quickly, and then they can use that energy that Schwinn just spoke about to join in the attack. So rather than using the energy rushing around the midfield, I wouldn't be surprised if they go long, go channels, and then get the third and fourth man runs from the players coming deep. What will interest me to see is what they do about Ozil, because we know he doesn't really have a position, so it's quite difficult to man mark him. A lot of times I've seen in this season, they tend to play Thomas Partey as a destroyer. He's athletic. I don't know if he's got the know-how to stop Ozil in terms of with the position Ozil takes up. The issue is they're going to defend very deep, so we won't have space to run in behind. And one of my worries before the tie even comes about is they will starve Lacazette of the ball, and he will have to come short. If he does what he does yesterday, and then when he comes short doesn't get back into position, I think it could be a very, very long 2 nights for us, because I can't see where the goals are going to come from. Even a lot of Ramsey's goals tend to come from runs in behind, but I don't think that space in behind will be there. I think Welbeck will probably have to play because his height's going to be a threat. I know their centre-backs are very good in the air, and Godin and probably Savic will play. But at the moment, if you look at a team without Welbeck, they'll let us have the ball on the flanks all we want, because they know we ain't going to score from across. Unless there's obviously a set piece and we've got defenders up. But from open play, if we get the ball wide, they'll let us cross the ball all day. So I think Welbeck will be an important factor. But it's difficult with them because they very much adjust to who they're playing. They're quite difficult. They're quite different to us, and we play regardless, and they play as opposed to who they're playing. And what I've just described is how I would probably play against stuff if I was them. I don't know. I don't know if I'm trying to guess Simeone. I'm not saying he might have seen another way to play against us that he feels works even better, but that's what I would do if I was him.
Yeah, interesting. What are your thoughts on maybe resorting to a back five? We know what Rob Holding did to Diego Costa last year in the cup final. He was really able to get in his head and was continuously nibbling at his feet and never really let Costa enjoy a decent spell on the ball. Do you think that's something we can look into, especially for the second leg?
It's definitely an option. It helps us in one sense, but it depends. I don't like Welbeck playing in the 2 behind the striker, which is what you obviously play when you're playing a back 5. Mm-hmm. If Mickey's fit, then it would be Mickey and Ozil behind Lacazette, you'd presume. Again, we kind of then lose the joys of having a fullback because you can't cross the ball. So you'd gain defensively, but you'd lose attacking wise.
What about? Sorry for interrupting, but what about a Welbeck in the striker role with Mickey and Ozil behind? Because we know he has the capability of pressing, and as you said, he provides that aerial threat as well. Maybe Lacazette gets sacrificed in order to accommodate that extra defender, and we move Welbeck centrally.
At this moment in time, as in right now, look, Lacazette could go and score 5 on Saturday, and all opinions change. But on Sunday, sorry. But at this moment in time, that's what I would do. But I don't think there's any chance Wenger will do that. And the backlash from fans
if things
will be
go wrong, yeah,
on a different level. Even before kickoff, I imagine being at the Emirates an hour before the game when the team sheet comes out and seeing no Lacazette. I think for me it wouldn't, but I think with a lot of people it automatically sort of lowers the tone or the mood slightly. So as I said, at this moment in time, I would do exactly that, but I don't think he would be allowed to, in a sense.
Well, I can understand, the anger if this happens at the Emirates coming into the first leg, because you expect us to ride the wave of our home form and try and get something out of the first leg. But I think if we are able to, assuming as I said optimistically, that we're able to get a result at the Emirates, this question was more tuned for the second leg when we visit the Wanda Metropolitano.
Yeah, I just don't think we can allow. I know it obviously, as I said, it would improve us defensively, but we don't want it to fall into the trap of just allowing wave after wave of attack, because they've got some quality players. They can score all type of goals. I mean, they can pick passes from midfield. As I said, Griezmann can do a lot, and Costa. We all know Costa can score every type of goal, and he can wind you up. He can win free kicks where they probably shouldn't win free kicks. So I agree that it would probably make us defensively more stable, but we don't want to fall into the trap of being made to park the bus just because we've got no outlets.
Fascinating. I think it's going to make for a very interesting affair. And MW Gunner goes on, and he has another question, and I'll throw this at you. He says, if we don't get Atletico in the semis, which of course is now refuted, does this mean the competition is fixed and UEFA are hoping for an Arsenal-Madrid final?
Well, the draw answered that for me, really, didn't it?
Fair enough. I think that's now been refuted, so we can move forward. And I'll throw this another question at you. And I think this is from a new listener, so welcome to the show, and thanks for chiming in. This is Hakan Larsen, who I believe is from Norway. And his question is, why is it that we struggle to pass the fucking ball to a teammate when we play against Russian farmers and other pub teams? We should be able to play our game and keep possession against most teams. ... Mental problem? Question mark.
I mean, I think calling them farmers is a bit unfair, but I get where he's coming from. I don't know how much he or anyone else has seen of us away from home this season, but we can't pass the ball against anyone. I mean, I was pulling my hair out as much as everyone else was, especially in the first half yesterday. Just our inability to keep possession. But yeah, I agree. We should be able to keep the ball against anyone. But away from home this season, we've just not been able to. So why that is, I can tell you. I have no idea why we leave London and suddenly can't pass the football to each other. But it seems to be the case. But I don't think... I mean, obviously he's mentioned lower level opposition there, but it's the same against all levels of opposition, and you could maybe understand it more against, I don't know, against a City away where they press so hard and whatnot. But you look, we couldn't keep the ball against Swansea away. We couldn't keep the ball against West Brom away. We was awful. I know we got a point, but it was terrible. Southampton away, we couldn't keep the ball. Got a last-minute equaliser. Away this season, we just haven't been able to keep the ball. I mean, we've got 3 wins away this season in the league, and they were Everton, who were awful, and we still went 1-0 down. Burnley with a somewhat lucky last-minute penalty when arguably Burnley were the better team. We didn't deserve to win that game. And Palace, where we was good in spells and awful in other spells, and we won 3-2, mainly through to some very good individual performances. But we had spells in that game where we couldn't pass the ball. So I think you can just look across our whole season and kind of disregard the opposition. For some reason this season, we ain't been able to give each other the ball.
I think that's fair. It's very, very hard to pinpoint a specific reason, isn't it? Because it's such a big category of games we're looking at, which is away games, that I don't think there's a single explanation to it. I think there's a lot going on that needs to be answered there.
Yeah, I agree. So on to the next question. It's from Sanjay Turani. Is it just me, or has Bellerin's performance been visibly affected by fatigue towards the latter part of our season? Although he may not like it, do you think Arsene has to consider using Chambers at right back in some of our remaining league games?
His level has dropped, and it's not just towards the latter part of our season. I think arguably this whole season has been disappointing from Hector, and I think he would agree as well. I mean, most players would, considering our league position, but even if you look at it, his performance individually from a couple of years before, where he broke into the team and got a goal against Liverpool and was blistering down that right wing in attack, especially. I think he probably didn't assume his career is gonna almost become a little stale 2 years down the road. So I don't think it's just fatigue towards the latter part. I think there's a lot that goes in there, and I think it's not just Hector who is responsible for this. We've spoken on this podcast many times about how Mesut Ozil vacates the right wing and moves centrally, and I think that has a lot to do with Hector's drop. He has to cover that whole wing, whether it's an attack or in defense, and that's not easy. He's quick, but to deliver that sort of intensity, 90 minutes, week in, week out, especially when you might be playing 2 games a week, is not the easiest thing. So I think he's a victim of the system. He's a victim of also not improving, which there has to be put some onus on him. But I think he has a future at the club. I know there's a lot of debate about his quality, and I know there's room for improvement, but I also think, considering the dearth of right backs in the world, I don't think we should write him off. As for Callum Chambers, I don't necessarily agree with Sanjay's assumption. I think Wenger rates Callum at right back. I think he sees that as a very viable option. Not his preferred option, but I think he sees that as a viable option, more so than Ainsley Maitland-Niles on the right. We've spoken about why Ainsley's played on the left, and I actually personally think he's suited more on the left just because he's had more time to play there. You can have a right-footed left back. That's not it's not wrong. Azpilicueta did it for many years, and he excelled at it. Not that I'm comparing the two, but just for an illustration point of view. So I think Callum Chambers is a very good option at right back, but with Laurent Koscielny and his Achilles problem, I think it's a tough task to throw Holding and Chambers into the team with Mustafi, who's always been suspect. So I think that's why Arsene sticks with Hector Bellerin throughout and doesn't resort to some of the other options he has at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I agree to an extent. I think Hector's not been good for a long, long time. He had a spell in January, I think maybe four to 6 games, where he was, I wouldn't say exceptional, but he was better than he had been for pretty much all of the first half of the season. And I think he'd pretty much reverted back to his first half of the season form in the last few weeks. As I said yesterday, I don't think he was bad. I just don't think he was anything. I don't think he had an impact on the game. I do agree with you massively, and I pointed out on here before a lot of times that we do hang him out to dry a bit, and at times I feel sorry for him. But also his individual level of performance hasn't been good enough. If the team hang you out to dry, just be good at what you like. Be good yourself, and if you get caught with players overlapping and stuff, there's nothing you can do about that. As long as you're doing your job. But I don't think Hector's done his job particularly well. On the whole, for probably 2 years now, or at least all of this season, and I'd say the majority of last season. I remember he lost his place in the team towards the end of last season to Chamberlain, who's a failed centre midfielder, essentially at Arsenal, or a failed winger, or a failed whatever you want to call him, but he couldn't get in the team anywhere else, and he took Hector out of the side. I know we slightly changed system, but it still shows you that the level that Hector was playing at wasn't good enough. So I wouldn't blame fatigue. He has played a lot of minutes, so maybe he is fatigued, but I wouldn't blame fatigue for his form, because his form has been like this for nearly 2 years. In terms of the right back, I'm quite the opposite to you. I would play Niles there ahead of Chambers, just because he's more like Bellerin and we can kind of play the same patterns. Chambers is obviously better aerially. So we've got an out ball from goal kicks, and in theory we should be better defensively, and we won't suffer from back post cross. I know it was the other side, but obviously CSKA's first goal came from a back post cross that landed on Monreal's head, and he got beat in the air. On the other way round, obviously Bellerin's susceptible to the same thing, whereas we're less susceptible with Chambers there. But we're not as good as with the ball. We've not got that pace down that side, and the crossing, not that it's Bellerin's strong point, but a lot of time he gets to the byline or close to the byline and cuts the ball back, whereas Chambers doesn't have that pace or attacking instinct to get in them positions, whereas Niles is more likely to. Also, as you touched on, I think, say on Sunday, I'd be amazed if Koscielny plays. So one of Holding or Chambers has to go at centre-back, and then if you play the other one at right-back, it's just not ideal. Having said that, I'm not sure how fit Maitland-Niles is, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them both playing on Sunday. But I think Wenger would rather play Bellerin and one of them at centre back than play both of them with Chambers at right back. But my personal choice would be Niles at right back ahead of Chambers if Bellerin is out.
Yeah, I think we'll have to wait and see how that works out, especially with Niles still missing. I think it's been a while since we've seen him play as well. So maybe there is some light at the end of the tunnel here, and he's making a return. But to be honest, I have no idea what's his status. Let's move forward, and Sanjay has another question, and this goes on to talk about Callum Chambers. Do you think Arsene deserves credit for the Chambers substitution, as it allowed El Neni, who seemed until then was in some sort of a midfield / third covering hybrid centre-back role, to play further forward, and it was his passing that created both our goals. So Sanjay does talk about some of the things we have spoken about, but how much do you think that was designed, and how much credit should be bestowed upon the manager for this?
What I would give him credit for is he changed the system to put El Neni there, and it has worked before. I don't like it, but it's worked before. And it wasn't working, so he changed it very quickly in terms of he didn't change the system, but he changed the personnel to better fit the system. So I think for me, you've got to give him credit for implementing a change, and instead of just abandoning it when it didn't work, still thinking it was the right thing to do, and obviously being proved right in the end, but tweaking it. So, I mean, I think, as I said, I think the substitution made complete sense. We don't know how injured or how fit Voldemort was, and had he been 100% fit, if that change would have happened. But it did happen, and I do think we've got to give him credit for it.
Speaking of Voldemort, I'll let you take this question as well. This is from Utkarsh Prabhat, and he goes on to ask, what do you think is going on with Voldemort's situation? Ramsey's return, our position in the league, are these some of the things that are playing with his head and impacting his performance?
So this question was DM'd to me last night, and I asked him to put him in the question thread, and I had a little chat with him on the DMs. And look, I think the contract situation is, I don't think Ramsey coming back into the team has anything to do with it, because they played well together earlier in the season. Once Ramsey returned, they still played well together. It's just in the last, I don't know, it gets longer every time we mention this, but maybe 4 weeks now that he hasn't been great. I'm trying to pinpoint where it started. I thought he was one of our better players at Brighton away. He was quite good in Milan. He wasn't at the level of many others, but he was quite good. So probably since then. So yeah, we're looking at 3-4 weeks. Whether that is the contact situation, whether it's an injury situation. He obviously pulled out of the England squad, but played the next Arsenal game. So you can argue, how injured is he? He's playing as if something's on his mind. We can all speculate, but I mean, there's very few that actually know. What was interesting, and again, I'll reiterate, I am not a stats man by any stretch of the imagination. But when this question came in, he didn't put this in the question thread, but when he DM'd me, he said, I wonder what Jack's pass completion was, because it would look very poor. And I thought, I'll look just to answer his question, and I would have agreed with him. Voldemort had the second highest pass completion on the pitch. So I thought, okay, that doesn't sort of ring true with what I saw. So maybe he just lost the ball more than passed it away. Maybe he lost it in terms of being tackled or overrunning dribbles or whatnot. And in I think it was 60 odd minutes he played, he lost the ball 3 times, which I don't think is a massive amount. Ozil was 5 times. I think Welbeck, obviously Ozil played longer, but Ozil was 5 times. Welbeck was 3 or 4 times. Ramsey was 2 times. And yeah, they played longer. But this is my argument with stats. I don't think he played well yesterday. I don't think he was the worst player on the pitch, and I think he's probably had some unnecessary criticism on yesterday's performance compared to the level of some of the other players on the pitch, and it seems that Voldemort's been singled out as the one who was the bad player. I didn't think that, but I was very shocked to see that all of these numbers were probably better than most people's, and this is why I don't like stats, because watch it with your eyes, which has become my catchphrase, and it tells you that he wasn't very good. But you look at the numbers, and if you just look purely on numbers and didn't watch the game, you'd find it quite hard to say he had a bad game. Interestingly, that was on WhoScored.com that I got the figures about pass completion and whatnot. But I think they do their player ratings, but I think they do it on a statistical model. So usually when you see player ratings in a newspaper, or when Savvy does them at Clock and Talk, or when you lot tweet them out yourselves, it's usually you watch the game and you rate how you think a player's played, which is normal. I think WhoScored do it on a statistical base, but I'm not sure what statistics they use. But Jack was our 3rd worst player on the pitch on their scoring, and he was better than I think 5 of the Moscow players. Again, that's not what I saw, but stats tell you otherwise. So if you're a stats man, and I know a lot of people are, then you can't really criticize him. If you prefer watching football with your eyes and forming your own opinion on what you see, I understand the criticism.
Just quickly, if you were a betting man, Tony, Would you wager on Jack sticking around?
No. I would offer him the contract, but I don't know why they wouldn't have done it already. Because he's willing to sign. They just have to put that amount on the table, and I don't think he's going to lower the amount he's willing to accept or the terms he's willing to accept. So I don't know. I don't think I want him to be, but I don't think he will be. If someone gave me £10 and said you have to bet on yay or nay, I would say no.
Wow, never thought we'll see a day where we'll see Jack Wilshere leave the club, but I guess there's still time and maybe things can turn around. But moving on, let's have the next question.
It's probably a good idea for me to load the questions in. Help. Zoo Roper Bob, at Zoo Roper Bob, has said, typical Arsenal 17-18 season away performance. Madness and boring all in one. And how on earth do we rate El Neni? Pretty poor, but ends up with 2 assists.
I'll go with the first part of the question first, and I think it's not typical. I think it's atypical. We got something out of this, even though it wasn't a win. We rescued a point and, of course, rescued the tie. So in that sense, it was a little atypical. But I get what he's saying, and it was very, very boring for the first 70. Edge of the seat stuff, especially when the second goal went in, and things did seem calmer once Welbeck found at the back of the net, as we spoke about. But I think El Neni is the more fascinating part of the question, and I'm excited to see what you also have to say about this. For me, El Neni is a brilliant squad player. He doesn't get into the starting 11 for me at all. And that's not to say in this starting 11. I think just his skill set and the quality of that skill set, I do not want to see in a starting 11 for the Arsenal. And again, that's not a dig at him because he suffices a purpose in the team, and it's an important one, especially as a tactical substitution. I think he brings a lot. He's got a tremendous engine. I think we saw that towards the tail end yesterday, winning the ball, running forward, and then, of course, threading that pass for Ramsey or Welbeck that eventually got finished. But when you're building from the back and when teams are sitting deep against you, which is most times than not against us, I don't think he brings that spark and that edge. We've spoken about his defensive inefficiencies, or maybe that's the wrong word, but defensively he doesn't bring that edge either. So for me, he's not necessarily poor, but he's also not excelling. And I think we've seen our share of players like that at the Arsenal. But in midfield right now, I think we could do with that. So I do like the fact that he has been given that extension. But I hope that that's not keeping in mind giving him a starting position.
I'm not putting words in Zero for Bob's mouth, but I think what he meant, just by the way the question is worded, is how do you rate yesterday's performance, considering he thought he was quite poor, but ends up with 2 assists. So do you rate him higher because he got 2 assists, or do you think actually the other, in Zero for Bob's opinion, the other 89 minutes were pretty poor?
I don't want to say he was good because of the 2 assists. I want to say he was good because of the quality of the 2 assists, and I think there's a certain difference there. Of course, you spoke about the weightage of the ball that was played into Welbeck. That was brilliant. And I just spoke about how he moved forward towards the tail end of the game and slid Ramsey through, running past their home midfield, essentially. So I think that's the edge I like. That's the part of him I like more yesterday than just getting those 2 numbers. I think stats are very, suspect in that case. So in that case, I would rate him as let's say a B+ or like a 7 or maybe even an 8 out of 10. But that's not just because of the numbers, but because of the quality of the assists.
Yeah, I mean, the first part isn't really a question, saying madness and boring all in one, and you pretty much have to agree with that, although yesterday I would have settled for boring. Yes, I'd love to be entertained when watching football, but there's a time and a place for boring. Teams have won leagues doing it. I'm sure Mourinho will tell you there's definitely a time and a place for boring football, and I would have been more than happy if yesterday was boring, the ball stayed in the centre circle for 90 minutes and we went through. Obviously that wasn't the case, but I don't think I don't think boring's always a criticism. And yesterday I would have settled for boring. Unfortunately, it probably wasn't because we was poor, yes, but I don't think it's boring because we were sitting on the edge of our seats definitely at one point, or with our hiding behind our sofas. In terms of, I'm going to answer the question on how I'm reading it, and in terms of how do I rate him yesterday, not what I rate him as a whole, because I think I've kind of been through that time and time again. In terms of yesterday, I thought the first half he was pretty much poor in all aspects. Again, I'm not saying he was the worst player on the pitch, but maybe a bit like I rate Bellerin for the whole game in that he was just there, he was a passenger. But it's in that position where you're in the engine room, I think it's worse if you're a passenger than it is for Hector at right back. The second half, I thought he was good in all aspects. His passing was good. He played the ball forward a lot more. He slotted in when he had to as the third man in that centre back role. His energy showed more. Whether he actually ran more or just because they were tiring, it appeared he ran more. I don't know. I've not looked at the kilometres he ran and broke it down for half, so I don't know. And as I said, I don't look at stats. But I thought he was very good in the second half and not so good in the first. I would go probably an 8 out of 10, with 7.58, somewhere around them. But someone did tweet us after the game and said the facts are the facts. If Ozil got them 2 assists, everyone would be saying that he was man of the match. And I probably agree with that because I've seen games, I think Milan away, I don't think Ozil was brilliant, but got both assists in a 2-0 win. And he didn't get man of the match, but everyone was raving about him. So I think it's only fair that we probably apply the same rule in that, for me, he wasn't man of the match. I would still give it to Welbeck, but you've got to say it's a good game.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think we do get lost amongst our personal favorites, and of course Mesut Ozil is a darling for a lot of Arsenal fans. So I think that's a good point. But I think I also like to see players in terms of their roles, and considering the 2 goals we conceded, when you have El Neni playing as essentially a defensive midfielder, a makeshift one, albeit. You expect a little more from him, and I think that's where I was left disappointed. But maybe this is a conversation for another time. I'll throw the next question at you, and I think this is one of the best questions we ever got, and it's from a new listener. So welcome to the show, and thanks for chiming in. This is Tom Lakeman, who is at Tom Lakeman1, and he asks, "Would you rather a chance fell to Alex Iwobi or Theresa May?"
See, it depends, because if it was a chance to fire a bomb at, let's say, Russia, Alex Iwobi, because he would miss and there would be no World War III. Fantastic, because I quite like being alive. I'm a big fan of that. If it was a one-on-one in the last minute, I'm not sure, because Theresa May might not score, but she can only do as bad as Alex Iwobi in missing and putting it out for nearly a throw-on. Also, she is a huge fan of running through fields. So is Alex Iwobi, but the grass is a bit shorter. So it's a more difficult one than you think. But definitely in terms of if it's firing a bomb, all day, every day, Alex Iwobi, I would want that chance to fall to.
Fantastic. I encourage our listeners to also chime in with this and share their thoughts with this, because I think it's a very well-balanced question. So thanks for that, Tom. Okay,
so from Hakon Larsen, who you asked a question to me earlier, he asked another question. The lack of individual coaching is so obvious, becoming more and more visible when you see some of the choices and the positioning of players. Will some of our players improve with the right coach and tactical changes? I love this question.
Fascinating question, and I think he has a very, very well worded question, and this is how I would like to explain this personally. There was Rafi Honigstein, who appeared on a WordCamp Wonderland a couple of months ago, and he made a fascinating point about Granit Xhaka and his time at Mönchengladbach. I think that gives you a good insight as to why Granit Xhaka is the way he is, and it's because during training, Lucien Favre would stop training as the boys are doing a drill or as they're playing a game, and he would just whistle the game to stop and then ask Granit to move 5 feet towards his left or 5 feet towards his right. And that's the level of detailing that Xhaka was used to. We all know that Arsene is very much laissez-faire with his tactics. There's a certain game plan, but the specifics are usually left to the players. And going on that sort of logic, I think it's almost certain that many players will improve with a different coach and with different tactics. Where I would like to put a small caveat, and maybe you can accuse me of being a Wenger fan here, is that a lot of Arsenal's play is based on that free-flowing attacking football. We allow certain players to have that free roam advantage. Case in point, Mesut Ozil, and that gets us the results a lot of times. With a new manager, I don't know whether their system will allow for that. And it might stifle us in the attacking third, but make us defensively stronger. So I'll leave that to you and to our listeners to decide which one they like more. But I don't think the grass is always greener and comprehensively greener with a new coach. He might improve some players, but he might actually not improve and yet sort of devolve some players, and I think Mesut Ozil is one of those players who might fall victim to that. What do you think?
The reason I really like this question is because it's something that's always fascinated and amazed me within football. That players very, very rarely, and I think Guardiola might do it, but I'm not even sure on that, they don't actually have one-to-one coaching. I've never spoke to a player, and I've asked a lot of players, that said, yeah, we have one-to-one coaching. I know what you mean about Xhaka, where that he's stopped at a session and moved him 5 feet, but that's helping one player. And if they can't do that for every player because the training session would never end. I don't know why that they don't have specialist coaches and they work on a skill set that player needs, and it might only be an hour every 2 weeks that player stays behind for an hour and works on whatever it is they need one-to-one, so that the dedication is fully on them. Look, I played a lot of individual sports, so it's very, very different. But I know football is a team sport, but it's a team sport made of individuals. And if you have great individuals, it doesn't always guarantee success, but you can make things happen that you maybe wouldn't happen otherwise. So it's always amazed me that individual coaching doesn't exist in football. So I know this question's labelled at criticising Wenger, and it's fair enough because he doesn't do individual coaching, but I think it's the same thing that you could criticise pretty much every coach in world football for. Even, I mean, they do it a bit more, but say a defensive unit, they might work in isolation of the four that are starting so they can work on their offside line and whatnot. And that's understandable to work in a unit, but it is always, as I said, fascinated me that they don't say, for example, Hector, you need to work on your crossing, for example, and we're going to get a crossing expert to just for an hour work with you, and then in 2 weeks we'll either work on it again or we'll work on something else you struggle with. And then they do the same for every player, and you identify a weakness and just work on that. And it may be because I've come from an individual sports background, but it's always amazed me, and I've spoke to players about it and they've just said, oh yeah, sort of, I don't know, it kind of makes sense. There was for our UK audience, and I don't know if you'd have seen it in the rest of the world, there used to be, there is a program on Saturday mornings called Soccer AM, and they used to have this coach on called this superior striker, and he wasn't a very good striker when he played. He was sort of League One level, I think. Mm-hmm. But he dedicated himself to becoming a striking coach, and he worked one-to-one with players. And he worked on various things, the types of finishing they wanted to learn or they struggled with, or the types of movement. And no club employed him, but a lot of players, well, not a lot, but a few players hired him individually. So outside, they would finish training with their club, do their normal training sessions. Then he would come in and work one-to-one with them on whatever they felt they needed to work on. I'm amazed that doesn't happen in every position, with every weakness, and I'm also amazed that it's not the clubs that do it. I mean, these players were doing it self-funded. Obviously, they've got the money to do it, but I'm amazed that the clubs don't do it off their own back.
Do you know names of certain players who actually employed this chap and used his services?
Off the top of my head, I think Dwight Gale was one of them. I can try and Google while you're asking the next question if there is one.
Well, before you get on to that, something that struck me as you were answering this question was, do you think there is a future, in terms of the future of coaching, and of course this is up for debate, but I'm interested to hear your point of view. we're looking at something more towards the lines of American football, where we have those specialized coaches. We have the offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator. Of course, there's a head coach, as there is, and then you also have coaches in charge of special teams, which is loosely set pieces in football. So, do you think we're maybe slowly moving towards that?
No, I mean, I wouldn't break it down as much as that, and I wouldn't have them play a role in a match day. I would just, as I said, maybe an hour a week, an hour every 2 weeks, just working on specific issues that they can build into their game. So, for example, say Danny Welbeck isn't confident with the open the body finish that he scored with last night, but just imagine for a second he wasn't confident in doing that. And he's identified that as a weakness. He feels that, that chance could fall to me quite a lot, but I'm not confident scoring in that manner. Then he gets this guy in who will just work on that and how your body shape should be and how you make the ball arc. And I mean, Omri was expert at it, and he used to say he always froze the keeper. So he made the keeper stop and stand still because it meant he couldn't then spring off and dive. Even if Omri is that coach that comes in and does it. But I don't think it'd go as far as a match day and having a coach leading this and a coach leading that. I'm just amazed that they don't work on individual weaknesses. Just looking at, so I've just gone on I've just googled Superior Striker, which is the name he went under, and his coaching program is under the same name. And there's not really a list of clients, but there's a picture of loads of clients. And to be fair, I mean, there's one, I don't know who it is, but there's one from Huddersfield, Jacob and Josh Murphy, who are at Norwich, Martin Waghorn, who's in the Championship, but he was at Rangers. Ashley Fletcher, who's in the Championship somewhere now. I saw him score the other day, Sunderland, but he's either on loan at West Ham or he was definitely at West Ham last year. So Premier League player, Northern Ireland international, I think it's Washington, Brighton player.
Those are some top level players. I mean, they're.
Oh yeah. So Andre Gary, Saido Berahino, Alexander Mitrovic. He's not messing. I mean, he hasn't got the elite players, but they're top. They're Premier League and Championship level, these guys. So obviously some people feel it works for them and some people don't. But I'm just amazed it's something that's not more common in football. And all of these players are all pretty much from different clubs. So again, it's all sponsored by themselves in a way. They're doing it off their own back. It's not like the club's got them in. And I'm just amazed it's something that doesn't happen in football.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's very interesting. I'd never heard of him. Of the Superior Striker before, so that's something definitely to look into and educate yourselves. Brilliant question though, Hakon Larsson. Thank you so much for chiming in. I mean, I think this might be one of the best debuts other than Tom, who also made his debut with the question this week. So thanks for chiming in. Hope you stick around and give us a follow also if you don't at @clockend_talk. Hit subscribe on YouTube and on iTunes and give us a rating. Give us a thumbs down if you don't like us, and blame Tez because I'm not usually hosting, so this is not my job. Moving on to our last question, and this is from Typhoon ABCI. He goes on to ask, which celebrity dies next after serial killer Ramsey scores? Anyone on your list that you'd like to knock off?
I should have thought this through. There's definitely someone. See, you've got to answer this question without being too hard and trying to be funny.
Yeah, I want to say Harry Kane, considering he steals goals off his teammate, but I don't know if I want him to die. I think that's a little too strong, isn't it?
No, I just want it to permanently rain on him, or every time he gets a Snapchat, it's just a team Snapchat update.
Or one of those buzzing noises that you can hear sometimes, and it just won't go away.
Yeah,
that'd be a fun one. Yeah, that'd be a fun one.
Yeah, so I mean, whether Ramsey has the power to make his goals really annoy someone instead of kill them, then there's a list of candidates. But in terms of deaths, I mean, I'm going to bet out on this one.
Yeah, it's a little too severe. But maybe send us a question next time, Typhoon, about how we would like to annoy some of the players that we dislike. As we just spoke, maybe Harry Kane's shoelaces come off 10 times a day. That'd be a fun one. Those small things that bother people, that happens to you perpetually, that drive you crazy, and I think that would be better than seeing him die, which would, let's be real, be pretty sad. But thanks nonetheless for your question, and thanks for chiming in. So I think that's all the questions for now, Tony, unless I've missed something.
No, that's all I've got.
So we spoke about Newcastle. Safe travels to you, and enjoy the tune up there. Enjoy spending time with the Geordies. We'll be back on Monday, and hopefully Tez will be with us as well in the host seat. We have a couple of guests lined up for the next couple of weeks, so do keep an eye out for that. And thanks for listening. Thanks for downloading. And up the Arsenal.